Hey all, Choiboy here. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be a bit more generic and target the wider audience of New Zealand investors or just anyone in New Zealand who is working at the moment. So I'm going to be talking about KiwiSaver today. KiwiSaver is something that most Kiwis actually use to fund their retirement in the later future, and it's been introduced back in the 2000s, somewhere in the mid 2000s. I think it's 2007 or so, and it's been there since, and it's a government backed fund helping people save better for their retirement and a lot of other things as well. And I thought I'd talk about this topic because I had a few viewers who mentioned, hey, what should I do with my KiwiSaver? I don't know what it actually does or how I can use it to its max potential. So I'll be talking about my opinions around those points and address them so you can better understand how it works and what it actually is. Just before we get into this presentation, just a disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt because I'm not a professional, not allowed to give any personal private advice, professional advice. So do your own research before you invest into the stock market or touch your KiwiSaver after looking at this video. It is just for your reference, for your own research, and you should be well knowledgeable before you touch anything major in your KiwiSavers after watching this video. As I just mentioned, not financial advice. Right here you can see that. So what exactly is KiwiSaver? Well, it's a New Zealand government-backed retirement savings scheme. So basically you put your money and you lock it in until 65. That is one of the main points of having a KiwiSaver. It's a retirement fund, and while you have your money locked up in your KiwiSaver, you can get interest on it based on what kind of fund you choose and how much you contribute yourself and how much your employer contributes and how much you get from government contributions as well. There's a lot of things going on. I'll go through them step by step, but basically these KiwiSaver providers will invest the money in your KiwiSaver balance for you instead of you investing that. So this is well made for people who do not know exactly how to invest and they don't really want to get into it. They just chuck money into this and it pretty much does everything for you based on how risk adverse you are and how comfortable you are with seeing your balance going up and down a lot, you know, every year or two. There is a bunch of questions they ask before they choose or recommend a fund for you. And basically how KiwiSaver works is that once you start working in New Zealand, you pretty much can fill out a KiwiSaver form, and there you can say I want 3%, 4%, 8% or 10% or any customized kind of rate towards your KiwiSaver from your gross income. So they will pretty much just take it out of your pay, and your net pay will be a bit less into your bank account, but it will be funding your KiwiSaver directly through IRD. And the next point is why KiwiSaver is so good is because you pretty much make free money off KiwiSaver if you just contribute to it. Let's say I have a 50k salary and I'm doing a 3% per year into my KiwiSaver from my 50k salary. Then my employer will also do a 3%, but from their 3% they would have to take off tax, which is the employer contribution tax. But you'll get a bit less than 3% from your employer. Nonetheless, you're pretty much nearly doubling your money if you do 3%. Who doesn't like free money? So actually that's not a lot if you think about it like that, but it does really show once that compound interest kicks in. It's really nice to have an extra 3% coming into your KiwiSaver balance. So that's one of the main reasons, but you also get the government contribution. So as long as you contribute 1,042.86 per year within the time frame of 1st of July to the next year's 30th of June, then you get a full payment of $521.43 into your KiwiSaver as a bonus as well from the government. So that's the kind of main thing about KiwiSaver. It's a bunch of free money straight from the get-go, and why wouldn't you do it? It's so nice. But people don't only use KiwiSaver for retirement fund, but they also use it to fund their first home. So when can you actually withdraw your KiwiSaver balance? So that's the next one. So you can either turn 65, which is the most basic kind of checklist. That's the whole point of KiwiSaver, a retirement fund. But also if you have a financial hardship or if you have severe illness, and if you need money, then you're able to withdraw that. Of course, there's a lot more complexity around those kind of things, so you would have to ask your KiwiSaver provider or something like that once those kind of things happen to you, which would be unfortunate. I don't think most people would kick into KiwiSaver for those kind of things unless it's really, really bad, but that also exists as well. If you move to another country permanently, then you can kind of withdraw everything in your KiwiSaver as well, which is nice as well, other than Australia. Because if you're going to Australia, you would have to go into their own kind of KiwiSaver scheme they have in Australia, and it pretty much transfers the funds from your KiwiSaver into the Australian scheme. So if you want to take out all your money in KiwiSaver before you turn 65, just go to somewhere like, I don't know, UK or something, and get all your money. Nah, I'm joking, don't do that. It's not really worth it. And there's a few other random ones which is pretty complex as well. Divorce, your partner can claim a bit of your KiwiSaver or something like that. And also if you die, then the people related to you, your family members would get your KiwiSaver balance. So that's the kind of things there. I missed out on first home, so let me just chuck that back in. Give me a sec. Alright, there we go. So I've added first home. First home is a big thing for a lot of KiwiSaver users. People get into KiwiSaver as soon as they can back in the days, before 2015 I believe, because the government used to give a free $1,000 kickstart, which you can't use for your first home anyways, but either way it's good to have $3,000 to start off your KiwiSaver balance, because it will be zero if you did register after 2015. But that's that. And for the first home, you can withdraw everything in your KiwiSaver except for that kickstart $1,000 balance to put towards your deposit for your first home. Okay, it must be a first home. It can't be an investment home. It has to be owner occupied first home. So that's the kind of criterias on when you can withdraw your money in KiwiSaver. Man, it's raining a lot. I don't know if you guys hear it, but we'll carry on. So why KiwiSaver? Why does this exist? I found out in general, you can probably even look around you, and the younger you are, and even older Kiwis, we're just not really good at saving. Like, we buy a lot of things. We buy expensive houses, and we can't even save that much, especially with the house prices nowadays. It's really hard to save. So, and back in the days, at least, I saw a lot of houses that had boats just sitting on their front yard or something like that, and always like a SUV hooked up to a boat. And I think that's the culture we had as Kiwis, and I guess that didn't really go so well. Once you hit retirement, you have no money to spend the rest of your life kind of, you know, financially free. So this is one of the main reasons why it was built, and the government really didn't want people struggling even off superannuation, so they put that to help alongside superannuation, which you get after 65 as well, and also for money for unexpected events and medical events or illnesses and financial hardship, as I mentioned before. And also a lot of people were quite scared of the stock market. So, you know, because people don't put it into the stock market themselves, they have professional KiwiSaver providers that actually knows what they're doing in the stock market and whatnot, and funds, and they kind of invest it for you, which is normally for the long term as well, which kind of eliminates a lot of the risk of doing stock market investing. So there's a lot of good reasons why KiwiSaver was built. Now, what kind of funds do we have in KiwiSaver? So each provider is a bit different, I would say, but there is a few kind of common fund types that most KiwiSaver providers would allow you to kind of register for. You can choose different types of fund depending on your circumstances, and it could be a lot of things, and there's a bunch of things. There's a bunch of things you've got to think about, but pretty much you can choose a fund, or you can choose to split your KiwiSaver balance amongst multiple funds to be a bit more diverse. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Not all providers give you a option to split the balance into multiple funds, but some do, so that's really nice. but you can only be with one KiwiSaver provider. So you can only have one KiwiSaver provider at any one point in time, but you can transfer to other providers every now and then. So that's fine. There's two main types of KiwiSaver providers. So one is the big banks like ANZ, ASB, Westpac, BNZ. They all kind of have their own KiwiSaver scheme where there's a bunch of KiwiSaver specific companies or investment companies that does their own kind of KiwiSaver schemes on top. So there's two main types. One's a bank and one's a like investment specific kind of company. So there's a few reasons why you'd go for a bank versus why you'd go for a KiwiSaver specific, but that's totally up to you. Normally people just go for low fees and high performance, right? So that's pretty simple. There's plenty of sites that shows you the performance and the fees and stuff like that, and there's a few sites that also compares them for you, so it's a lot easier to compare. There's funds and providers, and the different types of funds: we have defensive, we have conservative, moderate, balanced, growth, and aggressive. Now I took a screenshot from ASB KiwiSaver, which has a really good kind of fundamental basis diagram and a pie chart of how these different funds are invested. So there's two main types of assets they invest your money in. It's either income assets or growth assets, and it's the ratio between how much of your balance is in growth versus income defines your kind of fund, and that's why you can put into multiple funds. Then you can kind of diversify the risk a bit if you're a bit uneasy or if you have some uncertainty in the next couple of years. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but most people would just go for one single fund, and it really depends on what kind of situation you are in and how old you are and when you're going to buy your first house if you haven't already. There's a lot of things going on. So first of all, defensive or cash fund is normally just all income assets. Income assets is pretty much like fixed interest rates and stuff like that, maybe bonds, and very low risk that always gives out interest. It's kind of like a term deposit. I don't know if people actually use NZ cash funds or, cash funds in general. I think the only time you'd use a defensive cash fund is when you are about to buy a house or about to turn 65 and you want to take out your entire KiwiSaver balance. Then that's when I would change it to a cash fund, just so I know there's not going to be that much volatility in my balance until I take it out in the near future. The next one is conservative fund. That's when it gets interesting, because this is where you start to have international and Australian equities and stocks and funds, international stuff, which tend to grow a lot faster than New Zealand in general. So that's when the fund starts to kick in. Moderate is pretty much you are increasing your growth and you're decreasing your income assets ratio. So now it's like 40 to 60%. Balanced fund is also when it gets interesting, because now you have more growth assets than income assets. So you have more stocks and funds and stock market things rather than kind of fixed interest rate kind of things. So it's a bit more aggressive. And growth fund is when it's like 80 to 20% for growth to income, and that's when your KiwiSaver is pretty heavily invested into the stock market in general. And there are some providers that give you aggressive fund that's like 90% growth and 90 plus sometimes, and that's when you want to be really aggressive. But I think most people don't even go towards the aggressive fund. They just stop at the growth fund, and I'll be talking about that in the next slide where I talk about what strategy might be the best one. But a lot of people sit between the conservative to the growth depending on where they are in their life and when they're going to be withdrawing their money. So that's really important. And also I use a KiwiSaver provider called Juno, which had a pretty good growth fund. Hasn't been doing too great recently, especially since the war kicked off. But you can see it's a bit more detailed than the one in ASB, where you can see the growth fund I had was 5% cash or cash equivalents, 60% in international equities, Australasian equities at 20%, international fixed interest rate, that's like just basic, doesn't change the interest rate, just you're getting a 5% or whatever percentage you're getting for that interest, fixed interest, you just get that the whole time. So that's 5% and 10% of your KiwiSaver balance and NZ fixed interest. So that's the kind of ratios on how the funds actually work. It's just a matter of how many fixed interest rates do you have compared to how many kind of dynamic stock market level kind of return kind of assets you have in your fund. So that's what determines the funds. So it's not rocket science. You can have a look. Every kind of company would have their own funds, and they will show you how they kind of split out your KiwiSaver balance if you choose a fund. So just like the Juno one here, or also like the ASB, Westpac, ANZ, BNZ, Booster, you know, all these kind of things. They will all show you that. So which ones are the KiwiSaver providers? Now, there's a few sites that can help you with this. So there's one, I will just show you. It is the IRD. The IRD one will show you, which I'll put in the description below, all the kind of KiwiSaver providers they have in New Zealand, that because all the KiwiSaver money would go to IRD first, because your employer pays your IRD, then it will go to KiwiSaver. If you make personal voluntary kind of contributions, then it will go straight to KiwiSaver, but basically IRD will always know how much you contributed nonetheless. When your employer pays your KiwiSaver for you, it just goes for IRD. So that's pretty much that. Back to the slides. So we got big banks, as I mentioned, ASB, BNZ, Westpac. Okay, we got those kind of ones. We got also fund management companies or investment companies, or whatever they would like to call themselves. Juno, Simplicity, Milford, Booster, Fisher Fund. You know, there's a bunch more as well, as I just showed you in the IRD side, but these are the kind of providers. Normally you just want to get low fees, high performance, and just good consistent returns as well. So you can use these kind of sites like Sorted, which they have a tool where they compare all the kind of KiwiSaver providers, whether you're looking for conservative or balanced or moderate or growth. You know, it'll show you and compare all the ones. It's not 100% coverage for what I can see, but it will do most of the major KiwiSaver providers. If I just show you that one as well, which I'll put in the description below, you can be like, hello, I don't know what fund is best for me. So you can be like, hey, you can fill this out. Be like, I'm 25 years old. I'd like to retire at 65. I'm currently employed and I earn 50K. Then if you do that, and let's say I want to buy my house, my first home, in 2 years. So I'll have to use my KiwiSaver soon. But I'm also fine with possible gains and loss of 100% gains and 30% loss. That's fine. I don't mind the volatility. So that's what you do that. If you're a bit more risk adverse, you'd be like, okay, I really don't like volatility. I just want to keep my balance as steady as possible. Then this is what you'd be choosing, but you won't be getting that much of a interest rate, and your compound interest won't be that good. And I'll explain why, and I'll show you the strategies of how you can set up the best funds in KiwiSaver. So let's do that. And let's say I love high returns. I don't care about some ups and downs along the way, but I can't touch my money for the next, I don't know, a good 40 years or so. Then why not? That's fine. So it'll be like, okay, I currently have $25,000 and I contribute 3%, let's say. Most people would be on 4%. That's like kind of what a lot of people choose, but you can choose whatever. I'd say at least 3%, but 4% is good, especially if you have a low salary. And you can choose your fund. You can choose defensive, balanced, growth, or aggressive. Sometimes they don't have moderate. You know, these are very provider specific, so just make sure your provider has the fund you want, and it doesn't really matter. You can just check their performances and just compare the performances across the providers. So my results, and show me, and you just get a bunch of these kind of funds from providers, and they show you how much fees you'll be paying and how good the returns are. You can just check on their sites as well. They normally have it as well, but it's a good start. If you don't know many providers and what kind of funds they provide, it's a good start to start on the Sorted site. All right, back to the slides. So now you have a basic idea of what KiwiSaver exactly is. Now, what is the best strategy? Now, this also really depends on your current circumstances, as I mentioned. Find what fits you best given your age, first home status, investing style, and risk averse or not, etc. You know, basically, you just got to know yourself well, and you just got to make sure you're not flipping out, looking at KiwiSaver and feeling very uncomfortable or something like that. You just want to be cool about it and put it in a fund and a provider where you are happy to trust them fully and make sure you get your money back before you retire. So there's a bunch of things, also ethical investing. So ASB had a positive impact fund, which they go for like more environmental friendly ones, whatnot. There's a lot of different kind of funds for different providers, so check those out. I'm not going to go too much into details of those, but basically I'm going to be just finishing off this video talking about, you know, common strategies. So for most people, if you don't plan to use your KiwiSaver for at least 10 years, it's either you're 55 or younger, you don't plan to use your KiwiSaver to buy your first home anytime within the next decade. If that's the case, you'd be going for a growth fund. I say growth fund is probably the best one to sit on for the long term, because you should not be caring about the short-term volatility. If you really don't like the volatility and it eats into your sleep time and you're just worried about it and anxious, then go to a balanced fund or something like that. You shouldn't really sit on a conservative fund, in my opinion, for the long term, at least especially if you have like more than 10 years of runtime before you get to use your KiwiSaver. So that's one of the things. 4% is the most popular kind of option for what I can see, but if you have a high salary and if you also have a mortgage, then a lot of people do drop that to 3%, which is totally fine, which is probably I'm going to do the same as well. The stock market has never really failed anyone holding for the long term. So that's the main point, right? People can't make money off investing in general because they're not patient enough to wait for the long term. Sometimes it's just really bad luck and you just come in at the wrong time and you just lose money in the next month or two after you invest. So that's unfortunate. But if you wait out for the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, like, I don't know, Warren Buffett, then you actually make a lot more money. It's just that people can't wait for it because they get really impatient. So the whole point of this is to let it go, just contribute regularly through your employer, and just get your free money from your employer and the government as well for their contributions to your KiwiSaver, and kind of enjoy your retirement with a bit more money on the side from your KiwiSaver, which would be really great for anyone's retirement. So that's the kind of the main default kind of strategy. For people who are near retirement or their first homes, it's either balanced, moderate, or conservative. I'd say you'll be over, if you're older than 55, then you start to look towards more balanced or conservative funds, especially if you are risk adverse. A lot of people, once they turn 60, I see them put into conservative fund, or some people just leave it on growth. It really doesn't matter, but I'd say balanced is a pretty nice one for anything around 5 years or so before you get to use your money on your first home or your retirement when you turn 65. So that's the kind of two criteria on when you would go to a lower fund. And during retirement, it's totally up to you. Some people keep it on growth, some people, you know, keep it on moderate, balanced, conservative, and get fortnightly payments from the KiwiSaver balance, so they actually have a lot of their money still invested and they just take out bit by bit every fortnight or every month just to kind of get along and help them out with bills or food or whatever, traveling, whatever they want to do with their retirement. It's there for you to help, but also not losing too much value from inflation. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to go into too much detail around that, but by all means, you can take out all your money in KiwiSaver when you turn 65. That's totally up to you. If you want to buy a house straight up like that, if you have enough in your KiwiSaver, that's totally fine. If you want to help your grandchildren get their first home and help them with their deposit, you can use a KiwiSaver for that as well. I think there's a lot of ways you can do with KiwiSaver. It's pretty much your money after you turn 65. So that's totally up to you. And that's the whole point of KiwiSaver. Just make retirement slightly easier, financially easier for people in the future. So I forgot to mention, but this is why people would like to do KiwiSaver, and it's all about compound interest. So let's say you and the employer and the government contribution is roughly per month paying your KiwiSaver balance around $500 per month. Okay, let's keep it conservative. Okay, $500 per month into your KiwiSaver. That includes employer, your contribution, and the government contribution. Let's say I am 25 years old, and let's say I'm not going to use it for my first home. And let's say if I'm 25, I've got 40 years left of this. The average growth fund was annualized returns is around 10%, give or take. Okay, so let's say even being conservative on a growth fund, let's say it does a 9% for that 40 years. Okay, and let's say I have nothing at this point in time in my KiwiSaver. You know, by the time you turn 65, okay, assuming that you start at 25, you actually have 789k compared to your contribution, and your employer contribution and your government contribution total only is at 165k. So you literally did more than 4x your money just by doing that. So this is why people love compound interest, and KiwiSaver lets you do that, and that's the whole craze around why KiwiSaver is so good. I hope this was very useful for some of you who didn't really know what KiwiSaver is and how it works. Now, you might need to do a bit more research than just this video. It wasn't that in-depth, but I kind of touched on most kind of basic points about KiwiSaver, so you can kind of recall on some of these points, and you can do a bit more research based on which provider you are currently with as well. I think a lot of people tend to just use the bank scheme that they're with. So I was with ASB, so I started with KiwiSaver ASB, then I moved to Juno last year. So that's how I did it. So you just got to think about it a bit. Don't move around KiwiSaver too much. Just make sure you know how much fees you're paying and how much performance they consistently get, percentage per annum, and then just stick with it. If there are better options in the future, you have plenty of time to switch it later. But I do know that some people like to change their fund. They switch their funds on their KiwiSaver, trying to time the stock market. And if the stock market's going to fall, they go to like conservative, and if the stock market's about to be really bullish and go upwards, then they put it to growth fund. Probably don't do that. It's not the best idea to time the market. As we say in stock market investing in general, you shouldn't try to time the market. It's very risky and it's not that easy to do, and most people fail over the long term if they keep trying to time the market. It's just not that easy. No one can predict what the stock market's actually going to do. So it's actually better for you to just keep dollar cost averaging. That's what you're pretty much doing with this KiwiSaver. You're dollar cost averaging, regularly contributing to your KiwiSaver, also getting your free money from your employer and the government, and pretty much you're getting that invested based on what fund you're in. So it's already free money. Don't waste it. Don't do stupid things with it. Just stick with the basics and set it up well first and just leave it. That's my kind of advice there. Not financial advice, but my tip, let's say. And yeah, I hope this helped today. If you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up, put a comment down below what you thought, and any questions about KiwiSaver, I'm glad to answer them below, so put your comments down below. Subscribe to the channel, put the bell notification for my next live streams and updates, because I do a live stream every fortnight on a Sunday night, which you might be able to talk to me and I'll be answering people in live, so that's really fun. And also for my monthly Sharesies portfolio updates. I will catch you in the next video. I'll be coming up with these more generic kind of topics to help the wider audience, so let's see what I can come up with. Maybe credit cards next time. Anyways, until next time, I'll catch you around. See ya.